Hi, Beetle Eddie here. Today I want to talk about a different kind of a subject. And I don't want to talk about the Beatles. I always want to talk about the Beatles, but today I'm not going to talk about the Beatles, and I'm not going to talk about the solo Beatles, or any of them, John Paul George or Ringo. Today I want to go to a different subject. I want to talk about a certain comedy team, very big comedy team that was around in the 1940s and 50s. And I want to give you a rating. They made about 36, over 30 movies, but between 30 and 40 movies between the 1940s and 50s. They were the comedy team of Abbott and Costello. And I want to rank what I feel are the 10 best Abbott and Costello movies. I mean, they made some movies that weren't so great. I won't discuss that at all. But in my opinion, most of their best movies were in the 1940s. And they made one or two good ones in the 50s. They also had a TV show in 1950 called the Abbott and Costello Show that ran 2 seasons. In that show, they did most of their routines, their classic burlesque and vaudeville routines throughout the show. But I want to talk about what I feel are the 10 best Abbott and Costello movies. Start with number 10. Number 10, in my opinion, is a movie that was made in 1944 called In Society. By that time, they were very well established, and they just made this movie where they were plumbers, and they went to this rich person's house, and they made the shambles over the whole place. It was a very funny movie. A lot of their early movies had music in it, had songs from like groups like the Andrew Sisters and all that. This was one of them that had no music at all. Oh, wait a minute, they had a song or two, but nothing to talk about. So that was the movie in 1944. Lou Costello, at that time, just got over being very sick for about a year. And you can't see it in this picture. You can't see that he was sick at all, because he was just remarkable, remarkably funny. Okay, the next movie on my list, number 9, is a movie from the 1950s. Now, Abbott Costello made a lot of like Abbott Costello Meet. One of the biggest movies, Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. They made Abbott Costello meet the killer, Abbott Costello meet Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. But I feel, beside Abbott Costello meet Frankenstein, which is probably the best Abbott Costello meet there was. When I get to that, that's going to be high up in my list. But the number 9 movie, in my opinion, is Abbott and Costello meet the Invisible Man, 1951. This picture, there was in this picture there was a man who took the serum. He was they said he killed somebody, but someone else killed it. They found out someone else killed him, and he was going to get to the bottom of it. It was like a detective story. And Abbott Costello was a detective, so he hired them, and very funny. He was a boxer, a fighter. He took the serum, and he became invisible, the Invisible Man. And Costello, he's had a Costello fight in the ring with him actually doing the punching. Very funny movie. Okay, now number 8. Number 8 going back to the 40s now. 1942, they made a movie called Ride 'em Cowboy. That's a movie where they're in the West, and the movie Ella Fitzgerald was in that movie. She sings the song "Tisket a Tasket." Like I said, I don't like the music so much in Abbott Costello movies because first of all, it takes away from the comedy. But Riding Cowboy was a pretty funny Abbott Costello movie. It was made in 1942. Another one, number 7, is a movie also made in 1942 called Who Done It? Who Done It was a murder mystery movie. Now, that was the first time Abbott Costello ever made a movie with no music whatsoever. No songs, no singing, and Andrew Sisters and all that. And it worked. It was about 80 minutes long, and with all comedy. Very funny movie, a murder mystery movie. Murder mystery comedy. That's number 8. No, actually, it's number 7. Excuse me. Number 6, a movie in 1943 called "Hit the Ice." I'm not gonna explain what every detail of each movie was. This was sort of like a gangster movie. There was gangsters involved, and there was a gangster in a hospital pretending to be sick. And they went up to this lodge. Abbott Costello got involved with them. And, it was a very funny picture. Okay, and number 5. This is the top 5. Number 5, in my opinion, is their first hit. A movie that it was called 1941, Buck Privates. Not Buck Privates Come Home. This was a sequel to Buck Privates in 1947. But this one was made in 1941 called Buck Privates, and it was their first starring vehicle. They did most of their routines in that movie. A lot of their routines, very funny. They came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, they come out with this movie, and a lot of the movies were based on Buck Privates. Buck Privates came out at the start of World War II, just when there was a draft for the war, and everyone was into the being American and fighting for your country, and they came out with this movie Buck Privates. Very, very funny. The only bad little drawback was the Andrew Sisters, which they sang about 4 songs in it. Could have been better if they sang nothing, that just had more comedy. But they did, a lot of their routines. There's a very famous routine. Say you're 40 years old, you're in love with a girl 10 years old, you couldn't marry her, so you wait five years, now you're 45, the little girl's 15, you're only 3 times as old. You wait 15 more years, you're 60, the girl's 30, you're twice as old. How long do you have to wait till you and the little girl are the same age? Jokes like that. Yeah, so anyway, that was the Buck Privates. Number 4 movie, made in 1942. It was a movie called Pardon My Saran. Very funny movie. It's with them being on a chartered island, and they were involved with gangsters again. They were involved with gangsters, and they were also involved with the natives. Very funny movie. I'm coming back to my top 3 movies. Number 3, also made in 1941, had nothing to do with the war. Because when Abbott Costello made Buck Privates, everyone wanted them to make another movie that had to do with World War II. So then uh, they made in the Navy. They made Keep 'Em Flying. But this was also made in 1941. It was held back. I think it was the second one after Buck Private, but it was held back because they wanted them to actually make the more war movies, to release that first, because Buck Private was so popular. But this movie, I believe, is the best 1941 movie they made. Horror movie. A little bit of a horror movie. Horror comedy. A picture called Hold That Ghost, where they inherited, there was a gangster that was killed, and they inherited their house, and what happens in the house is hysterically funny. Ghosts, not ghosts, whatever. You have to see this movie. Very funny movie. That brings me to the last two movies, top two. Number two. And you're going to say, why is this number one? I'll explain why. Number two. 1948 movie. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. What made this very funny was Universal had two things. They had Abbott and Costello, and they had the monster movies. Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman. They said, why don't we make a movie we'll have both of this together? They bring Abbott and Costello for the comedy, and they bring, the other guys in for the straight serious stuff. What made it so good was they were serious, and Abbott and Costello at the same time was funny. So a lot of people say that's their best movie. I'm not going to say it's the best movie. There's one more movie that I think is much better. We'll get to that right now. The number one movie. In 1945 and 1946, Abbott and Costello had a fight. They almost broke up. And it was over a maid. Story about... It was over a maid. Abbott had a maid and fired her, and Costello hired the maid. And then they got mad. Why did you hire a maid that I fired? Stupid thing. They stopped talking to each other, and they made a couple of movies the year that they weren't talking to each other, and but they did it differently. They weren't acting as a team. In 1946, they made two movies. One movie was called Little Giant, and also the one that I say is their best movie, The Time in Their Lives. They weren't acting as a team, because Costello was on his own. In Little Giant, Costello was on his own. Abbott was on his own. They had maybe one scene together, like one routine together in Little Giant. Off screen, they didn't talk at all. They almost broke up. At the time of their lives, they were even more separated. Costello is a Revolutionary War movie. But Costello was killed during the Revolutionary War and considered a traitor. But he had a letter from General George Washington that shows that he wasn't a traitor, and he could go where he wanted to go, to heaven. but he was bound. They made him a curse. He was bound to this place and had to stay there. He couldn't get out. And years and years, he was a ghost. Him and this lady, they were both ghosts. And it was 1946 already, from the Revolutionary War to 1946. And he said that he wanted to haunt that house. Abbott was part of the house. Didn't talk to each other at all. One was a ghost, one wasn't. Didn't talk to each other at all. But it was the best of the Abbott and Costello movies, in my opinion, and I believe in a lot of other people's opinion. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein being number 2. Luckily, they made up. They didn't break up, and they were able to do more movies in the late 40s into the 50s, having their TV show and all that. They didn't break up, unlike another team in the 1950s that did break up. One was a singer. I'm talking about Martin and Lewis. So these are my 10 top Abbott and Costello movies of all time. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you guys. Bye-bye.